Back in the spring of 1872, the town of Three Rivers was nearly wiped off the map by one act of recklessness and one act of bravery. The fire started behind Langston's dry goods, maybe from a tipped lantern, maybe from lightning, but it took less than an hour before half the town was choking in smoke. That's where this story begins. Not with romance, but with ash. Clara Whitley was only 17 then, barefoot, wild-haired, and too stubborn to be scared of anything. Until that day, she'd been trapped inside the milliner's shop where she worked when the fire swept through Main Street like a curse. Screaming for help, trying to punch out the back window with her hands. She would have died there, everyone said later. Would have turned to smoke like so many others. But someone pulled her out. A boy, not much older than she was, with soot on his face and blood on his knuckles. He said nothing, just kicked through the burning door, wrapped her in his coat, and carried her into the street like she weighed nothing at all. Then he vanished into the smoke. No name. No thanks. Just a face she'd never forget, sharp cheekbones, a scar across his brow, and the look of someone who'd seen too much for his years. For months, Clara searched for him. Asked every stranger passing through. But no one knew the boy who saved her. People called him a ghost. A miracle. Eventually, she stopped talking about him. Life moved on. The town rebuilt. She married a doctor named Elijah, a good man. Steady. Predictable. But somewhere deep in her bones, she still felt the imprint of those arms around her. The boy who vanished with the smoke. The morning he arrived, the sun hadn't yet cleared the ridgeline, and already the air felt strange, like something heavy was crawling in over the hills. Three Rivers was a kind of town that could feel when trouble walked in. And trouble did walk in, astride a black horse with one white sock and a saddle worn raw from miles of dust and heat. He didn't speak to anyone as he passed. Just nodded once to the old man sweeping the saloon steps and headed toward the livery like he'd been there before. Clara saw him first from her shop window. She was measuring chamomile for an older woman's tonic when her hand stilled mid-scoop. Something in the shape of the man, his posture, his shadow, the way he dismounted like the horse was just an extension of his body, made her heart knock against her ribs. She turned away before he looked up, scolding herself for being foolish. He was just another traveler. One of hundreds who passed through. She had a business to run, a name to uphold, and memories she'd buried so deep, they barely whispered anymore. But that night, her dream stirred them. She saw the fire again, the heat crawling up the walls, the smoke in her lungs, the cracking wood and the hand that had broken through it. She felt her young self lifted, spun into cold air, then cradled against a broad chest. A face above hers. Dirt, blood, ash. A scar across the brow. Eyes that didn't match their youth. Eyes that already knew loss. She woke up gasping, hands shaking. That's when she realized why the man had looked familiar. The next day, he walked into the general store and asked for coffee beans, jerky, and a small bag of nails. He paid in coins that looked older than they should have been and gave his name like it weighed something. Cole Maddox, he said. I'm looking for a man named Elijah Whitley. Silence fell over the counter. Elijah, Clara's late husband, had died over 2 years ago, but his name still carried weight. People in town had respected him. Respected Clara even more since she carried on his work with grit and grace. The storekeeper, a wiry man named Seth, narrowed his eyes. Why are you looking for him? Cole didn't blink. Just had some business with him. Guess it's too late. He turned and left before anyone could ask more. But word spread fast in a town like Three Rivers. By dusk, everyone was talking. Who was this Cole Maddox? Why was he looking for a dead man? Why did he walk like he'd been shot more than once? And look like he didn't care if he was again? Clara sat on the porch of her shop that night, arms crossed over her apron, eyes watching the fading street. The same street that had burned once. The same street where she'd almost died. The same street where he now stood, leaning against the hitching post, hat low, watching her with a gaze so piercing it made her look away. He knew. She didn't know how, but he knew who she was. And that terrified her. He didn't approach. Didn't say her name. Just watched. Then tipped his hat once before disappearing into the alley behind the saloon. That night, Clara locked every door and window. But sleep didn't come. Because the face in her dreams was no longer a stranger. And the man with the gun had come back with unfinished business. For 3 days, Cole Maddox walked the dusty boardwalks of Three Rivers like a man searching for something only he could see. He said little, drank even less. His hat never came off, and his eyes never softened. But everyone noticed the way he studied the town, the way his gaze lingered on the burnt-out brick behind Langston's dry goods, where the fire had eaten half the town a decade ago. Like he was measuring the scars. People whispered behind his back. Some said he was a bounty hunter. Others said he was an outlaw looking to settle an old score. One man swore he saw a faded wanted poster with Cole's name on it in a sheriff's office 2 counties over, though no one could prove it. And then there were those, quiet, older folk, who remembered a different story. One about a boy who ran into a burning building and never came back out. Clara heard every version. She always did. She had become the kind of woman the town trusted, admired, even feared a little. The widow who kept her chin high, who never wept in public, who ran the apothecary with a surgeon's precision and a preacher's calm. But underneath that stillness, something stirred. And the more she heard, the harder it became to ignore. It was the way Cole moved. The small limp that appeared on damp mornings. The quick twitch in his shoulder every time he passed open flame. The scar above his left brow that pulsed white when he clenched his jaw. Every detail came crashing back like a wave made of memory. One morning, Clara did something she hadn't done in 10 years. She opened the drawer beneath her counter, reached into the back, and pulled out a worn leather sketchbook. It smelled of dust and mint and old grief. She opened it slowly. Inside were only a few pages. Most were blank, but one contained a single charcoal portrait, rough, smudged, drawn by a trembling 17-year-old hand. The face of the boy who had saved her from the fire. She had drawn it over and over that first year. In the dark, by candlelight, desperate not to forget. The lines weren't perfect, but they were burned into her. The sharp jaw. The piercing eyes. That scar above the brow. Clara ran her finger across the drawing, as if touching it would settle something. But all it did was confirm what her heart already knew. Cole Maddox wasn't a stranger. He was her ghost. The one who saved her. The one who disappeared. That evening, she left her shop early and walked toward the blacksmith's where Cole had been seen repairing the shoe on his horse. Her palms were sweating beneath her gloves. The town bustled around her, children playing stickball, women trading preserves, but all she could hear was the thudding of her own heartbeat. He was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, coat half-buttoned. His eyes met hers before she even spoke, and something unreadable passed between them. Not fear, not recognition, but something older, like unfinished music. Clara stopped 3 feet in front of him. The noise of the town faded away, swallowed by the silence between them. "You pulled me from that fire," she said, voice level. "Didn't you?" He didn't answer right away, just stared at her like she was something holy and haunted at once. His mouth parted slightly, and for a second she thought he might deny it. But then he looked away. "I didn't come here for thanks," he said. "I came to see if you were still alive." Clara didn't blink. "And now that you know." He shrugged. "Guess I can leave." But neither of them moved. Finally, she stepped closer. "You didn't tell anyone who you were. Not then. Not now." His jaw tightened. "Because it didn't matter. Back then, I was nobody. A stable hand. Orphan. They blamed me for the fire. Said I started it because I was sleeping in the back of the livery that night. Mayor's son needed someone to pin it on. So they ran me out before the smoke even cleared." Clara's chest rose slowly, her breath catching. "You save half the block." "I know." He looked at her then, raw and open. But truth doesn't weigh much when lies come dressed in fine coats and money. She felt something twist in her gut. Guilt, grief, anger. It all collided. Why come back now? He looked past her toward the apothecary, the window she'd stood behind the day he arrived. "Because I needed to see if you were real. You were the only good thing I carried from that day. I kept thinking, maybe if you survived, maybe something I did mattered." Clara reached into her bag and pulled out the sketchbook. She opened it to the page, the one she hadn't shown anyone in a decade, and held it up. "I've been looking for this face since I was 17, she whispered. "I just didn't realize it had changed." Cole looked down at the drawing. For a moment, his entire body stilled. Then something flickered behind his eyes. Pain, maybe. Or something softer. I didn't think I'd ever be remembered, he said quietly. Not like that. The air between them felt thick with smoke, with memory, with all the words that had never been spoken. And suddenly Clara understood why she'd never fully given her heart to Elijah, kind as he was. Why she'd never felt safe when the wind blew from the east and smelled like fire. She had been waiting for the boy in the flames to come back as a man. She closed the book and held it to her chest. You never told me your name that day. Didn't have one that mattered, he said. But it's Cole. Cole Maddox. She nodded once. I'm Clara. He smiled faintly, and for the first time, she saw the boy again, beneath the grit, beneath the scars. That night, Clara stood at her window again, staring into the quiet street where Cole vanished into shadow. But this time, she wasn't haunted. She was awakened. For the first time in years, Clara felt the past stretching its limbs inside her, alive, pulsing, unfinished. She had built her life atop ashes, carefully arranging bricks of order and purpose, convinced that the flames would never find her again. But Cole's return had sparked something combustible, something she couldn't name but couldn't silence either. The townsfolk sensed it too. By the following week, Three Rivers had changed its rhythm. Folks leaned closer when speaking, glanced twice over shoulders, and locked doors they used to leave open. The sheriff kept his eyes on Cole every time he walked down Main Street. Rumors about the fire resurfaced, who started it, who covered it up, and why it had vanished so easily from the town's memory. Then came the letter. It arrived one rain-drenched morning, tucked inside a steel bag left outside Clara's apothecary. No name, no return mark, just a wax seal smeared with soot. Clara opened it alone, in the back room where she kept the herbs no one else touched. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the words chilled her. You're stirring bones that were buried for a reason. Ask your friend Maddox if he remembers why the mayor's barn never caught fire. Or why the boy who saved you disappeared without a trial. Some debts collect interest. She read it twice before folding it up and locking it in her drawer. Then she poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a teacup and sat in the dark, heart thudding. She hadn't spoken to Cole since their conversation at the blacksmith's. He hadn't returned to the shop, hadn't left a sign. But she knew he was still in town. She could feel it, like static in the air before lightning hits. That night, she found him in the old cemetery on the hill. He was standing by a crooked fence post, hat in hand, coat soaked from rain. His back was to her, but he didn't flinch when she approached. You came, he said without turning. I got a letter, she replied. Someone doesn't want us digging up the past. He let out a slow breath. They've been watching. I saw a man outside your store yesterday. Same man I saw before I left 10 years ago. Clara stepped beside him, squinting through the mist. There was a small grave at his feet. Unmarked. Forgotten. This is where they buried the boy they blamed. He shook his head. No. That boy's still breathing. Barely. But the one they buried, he was my brother. Clara's throat caught. I didn't know you had. No one did, Cole said. He was simple-minded. Gentle. Wouldn't hurt a fly. But the town didn't care. After the fire, they needed a name to clear theirs. So they found the weakest one they could. He dropped to one knee, brushing mud off the rotted wood. His voice cracked. They said he started the blaze in the livery. But it wasn't true. I found the lantern thrown through the mayor's barn window myself. Smelled kerosene. Saw the rags. It wasn't an accident. Someone set it. Someone who wanted to collect on the insurance and erase old debts. And you knew? Clara whispered. I tried to tell. No one listened. By the time I went back to town, they'd already dragged him out of the woodshed and... He didn't finish the sentence. Clara put a hand on his shoulder. It trembled under her touch. They buried him without a name, he continued. Told everyone he fled. But I marked the spot. Came back once a year when I could. Couldn't let him be forgotten. Clara swallowed hard. And Elijah, my husband? Was he part of it? Cole stood slowly, wiping his hands. His eyes held pain and conflict. Elijah wasn't evil, he said. But he was scared. He worked for the mayor's office back then. He saw the real ledger books, the missing money, the debts. He knew what the fire covered up. But instead of speaking out, he kept quiet. Helped rewrite the story. They gave him a promotion, a house, and you. The words hit Clara like a slap. She staggered back a step, her breath gone. "You're saying, he married me to keep me from asking questions?" "No," Cole said gently. "I think he loved you. But love and guilt ain't strangers. Sometimes they sleep in the same bed." The silence after that was brutal. Clara stared at the grave, her mind spinning. She remembered how Elijah would wake in cold sweats, how he'd flinch at the sound of firecrackers, how he'd avoid the west end of town like it was cursed. And suddenly, the truth was unbearable. "He was a good man," she whispered, almost to herself. "He was," Cole replied. "But even good men can make deals with the devil when they are scared enough." Clara turned to face him. "What do we do now?" Cole looked toward the darkened hills beyond the cemetery. "We find the ones who wrote that letter. We make them speak. The town deserves to know the truth. Your brother deserves it. And what if the town turns on us again?" He met her gaze. "Then we burn the lies down ourselves. But this time, we walk out of the flames together." Clara said nothing, just nodded. Together. That word meant something now. She looked at the unmarked grave one last time, then reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a tin of salve. Kneeling, she smeared it across the weather-worn wood. The rain would wash it off by morning, but for now, it glistened like balm over a wound. A name came to her lips, one she hadn't spoken before. "The name," Cole whispered. "Micah Maddox," she said softly. "You're not forgotten anymore." As they walked back to town, shoulder to shoulder, the clouds split just wide enough to let the moonlight touch the grave. And in that light, something shifted. Not the past, but the weight of it. Clara and Cole weren't just survivors anymore. They were truth-bearers. And soon, Three Rivers would have to reckon with what they had to say. The next morning, the town of Three Rivers woke to the sound of the church bell ringing, steady and slow, 10 times in a row. Not a call to worship. A signal. The bell hadn't rung like that since the fire in 1872. And now, once more, smoke curled above the hills, but not from destruction. This time, it came from justice being set alight. Clara stood in front of the courthouse steps in her dark riding coat, her hair pinned up in a bun that made her look more judge than apothecary. Cole stood beside her, jaw set, a folder tucked beneath his arm. The townsfolk gathered with cautious eyes and hushed whispers. The mayor's son, now grown and smug behind gold-rimmed spectacles, leaned against a wagon wheel, arms crossed. Sheriff Bartley stepped forward. "What's this about, Clara?" She didn't blink. "We're reopening the story of the 1872 fire. Not with rumors this time. With proof." Cole handed the sheriff the folder. Inside were 3 ledgers, books Elijah had kept in a locked chest, never shown to anyone. Clara had found them the night before, hidden beneath loose floorboards in her home. She didn't understand every figure, but Cole did. The numbers told a tale of bribes, debts, and payouts that painted a picture blacker than soot. Alongside them were copies of insurance claims, dates that didn't match, and one page from a confession, written in a trembling hand, unsigned, but unmistakable in detail. It spoke of a plot to start the fire to clear debts and collect the mayor's failing property through a backdoor deal. It named 2 men. One had since died. The other now stood among the crowd, shifting uncomfortably in his boots. Mayor Langston himself. Gasps rippled. The sheriff turned pale as parchment. "You expect me to believe this?" the mayor snapped. "From a boy who vanished for a decade and a widow mourning her past." Cole stepped forward. "You believed lies once because they came from money and suits. Now try believing the truth from the mouths of the burned." The mayor laughed, cold and bitter. "You're nothing, Maddox. A drifter with dirt for proof. You think this town will believe you over me?" Clara lifted something from her pocket. The letter. The one left outside her door. She held it up. "We already do." The sheriff took it, read the first few lines, and froze. Then he turned to the mayor. "You wrote this." The mayor's jaw clenched. "Prove it." Clara's voice rose, steady, strong. "The ink matches your personal stationery. The seal is your family's crest. And I found one of your ledger entries referencing Micah Maddox by name." A murmur ran through the crowd. Faces turned, some with disbelief, others with dawning horror. "I didn't kill that boy," the mayor said, his voice faltering. "No," Cole said. "You just gave the order." And with that, Sheriff Bartley reached for his cuffs. The mayor resisted, briefly, foolishly. But the weight of eyes around him was too much. Within minutes, he was disarmed, his authority stripped. For the first time, Three Rivers saw him as he truly was. A man who'd burned down his past and expected no one to notice the smoke. Afterward, the crowd remained still, quiet in a way that only comes after a storm has cleared. Some were ashamed. Others wept. A few approached Cole, offering nods, gratitude, or hushed apologies they couldn't fully articulate. He didn't need them to. He just watched as the truth finally took root in the place where fire had once scorched everything. That evening, Clara and Cole returned to the grave on the hill. They brought with them a new headstone, simple, sturdy, carved by Clara's own hands with words etched deep. Micah Maddox, gentle soul, brother, innocent, lost in smoke, remembered in flame. They placed it gently, side by side, then stood together in silence. You did it, Clara whispered. You brought him home. Cole looked at the sky. The wind smelled like sagebrush and clean rain. I think you did more than that, he said. You gave him a voice. They stood that way for a while, no need for more words. The bond between them no longer forged in memory or pain, but in truth and shared fire. Later, as the sun dipped below the ridgeline and lit the horizon in shades of gold and ember, Clara turned to him. Where will you go now? He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, his eyes didn't hold fear or shame. Only possibility. I was thinking, I might stay. She smiled. Not wide, not dramatic, just enough to answer every question he hadn't asked. They walked back down the hill together, the town glowing beneath them. And as the wind rustled through the pines and the last light kissed the rooftops, the ghosts of 1872 finally laid down to rest. In Three Rivers, the fire had returned. But this time, it brought healing instead of ruin. And in the ashes of the old, something new began to bloom, rooted in truth, tempered by time, and warmed by the kind of love that survives even the fiercest flames.